We're going?
We're going.
Okay. So as you can see, the Lusitania here sprung another leak. And instead of making a cardboard gasket this time, we're going to try something different. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of Permatex. A lot of you have probably used it. It's a wonderful tool. I'm not trying to be like Billy Mays here and sell you something, but it is a handy thing. A lot of times you'll get these older vehicles and you'll have gaskets in here. And the problem is that I don't know if Wisconsin's even around to make gaskets anymore, so it's really hard to find parts. So you got to make your own. Permatex is wonderful for working with oil. Anything oil-based, it'll put up a real good seal and will hold it in there. There's two things that you should not use Permatex with. Any ideas? There's one application and one of them something that it shouldn't come in contact with.
Gas.
Fuel. It can't come in contact with gas. It breaks down the rubber and it won't hold the seal. One other item. It's probably the most important gasket in the entire engine. Head gasket. Really with the head gasket, you have to replace it, otherwise it's not going to seal. So you can't use Permatex in that application. It just won't hold it. It doesn't hold up to the extreme pressure. It's also sensor safe. I mean, this thing doesn't have any sensors on it. It runs by sense of smell. But on a lot of newer vehicles, there'll be things like oxygen sensors, manifold absolute pressure sensors, and they will react with certain elements that you put in the engine. So you got to be real careful about what you use, otherwise it will mess with your fuel economy and the way that the engine fires and things like that. So to use this tool, it's always plugged at the end. If you haven't noticed before, there's a cap in the engine. So rather than cap in the poker in the cap, I don't know what else to call it. But instead of using your pocket knife, you can just jab that in there and you're good to go. It also comes with this little tube, and usually if you use this to get plugged up, so you got to ram a nail through it after you're done. But for this, I'll just use it by hand. And it takes a pretty liberal amount, so you can squirt quite a bit on there. But before you do that, you want to make sure that you got a good clean surface. If there's any oil on here, it has a real big problem sealing. So it's good to take just a little bit of anything that you got lying around, whether that's gas, or right here we've got carb cleaner. Ether works really well. You just spray that on there, and then you wipe it back off, and then you got a nice dry surface to work with. That way you get it good and tacky. So then you just put a nice liberal spritzing around the edge here. And, I mean, you can't really have too much, just as long as you don't get, you know, you gotta spackle it on there a little bit. Then you'll smear it around with your fingers. It's really messy, so if you get it on your clothes, it'll be a bugger to get it off. It doesn't come out in the wash very well, especially this copper stuff. They also make the black aviation stuff, and I don't know if you can even wash that off your hands, so you gotta be real careful with that. And in a lot of applications, it's good to let it dry. Say you had a gasket that, you know, wasn't in contact with oil, anything like, say, your water pump. The water will actually wash it away if you put it on there without letting it dry. So you might want to just set it under a heat lamp or something for an hour or so and let it get real nice and hard, and then bumper it up and put the water pump back on. Okay, so that's that. That looks like plenty of it. We'll set this back on there and we'll bolt it back up tight. So that's our Permatex demonstration for the day. Now you can get back to working on your small engines.